What's up, everybody? Thank you for choosing To The Brim. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on Spotify. Today's episode is a great episode as we hear from the Roses and how love triumphs all.
Welcome to The Brim. I am Mo, your host here at To The Brim. Today's episode is a different episode. I am partnered with my wife, and we have some of our friends here. Bree has been mentioning them. Hey, we want them to mentor us and just talk to us and have conversations with them. It's people we value and respect highly. But here we are at the Roses. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
I am Michael Rose, pastor of Berean Christian Mission Center here in Independence, Kansas.
All right, and I'm Detrea Rose.
Yes. Detrea Rose. They are the Roses. We call them the Roses. I remember when we moved into this house, Bree kept asking about the Roses, like, oh, we should sit down and talk to the Roses. We should sit down. They're just different. They're like something special about them. And at first I was like looking at my wife like, hold on, what you? Like, what's happening? You know, what's happening?
What's going on?
But I had the opportunity to coach with Rose, and I just knew the caliber of a man that he was. So I was like, she sees what I see in him. So I thought it was super cool how she saw that in you, Mrs. Rose. And now we're here. So who are the Roses? Who are the Roses? If introduce one another. Who is Michael Rose? And
I'm gonna let her go first.
Ladies first.
Whoa. Yeah, and just call me Detrea for sure.
Detrea.
So who are we? So I'll start at the beginning of when we met because I think it's a really cool story. Ooh. And I like to tell this story a lot to people. So back in 1993.
1993.
It was the first day of school at Pittsburgh State University.
Oh, snap.
And I was walking across campus from a job interview. I graduated from Fort Scott Community College. And so naturally I came on up to Pitt to finish out. And I'd worked as a student worker in the admission office. So they called Pitt and said, hey, there's somebody coming. So I went for an interview on the first day. And as I was walking back to my dorm room, there he was standing on the corner of Yates Hall.
Hey.
And so
hey, you mighty man of God.
He was standing right there. And so he was just a good looking guy, you know, and so, you know, as the young people say today, I shot my shot, right? And I was like, hey, how are you? And I stuck my hand out and I shook his hand. He was like, who's this chick? And I was like, hey, I'm Detrea. I'm Detrea Brown. What's your name? And he said, Michael. And I said, Michael what? And he said, Michael Rose. So we just started talking, and next thing you know, his friend was like, my car just got towed. So, you know, I said, I got a car. I can take you home. So, you know, and as they say, the rest is, he can tell you the rest. But I never got his phone number because I was just like, oh, my God, I just took this guy home, and I told him all about myself. And when I got back to the dorm, I told the girls, I was like, oh, my God, I just met this guy, and he is so cute. But I don't know his phone number. And they were like, who is he? And I was like, it's this guy named Michael Rose. And my girlfriend, she's like, I know him. He was in a fraternity, and so she said, my boyfriend is his frat brother. And so we drove back by his house, and I was hiding, I ducked down in the back seat, and she's like, hey, Michael, what's your phone number? So he said his number, and she looked back in the back seat and went, 235. And he was probably like, what in the world is happening? But I was in the back seat, I was ducked down, and I was writing down his phone number. So, yeah.
I love that.
Love at first sight.
That's
really.
a good friend.
1993.
So now that I heard Detrea's point of view from that love story,
oh boy,
I gotta hear the Michael Rose, the man, the myth, the legend.
Well,
the one standing in what, Yates Hall?
Standing on Yates Hall. Well, my path that brought me to that point was I was at a point where I had flunked out of college.
Oh wow.
Went to JUCO in Mississippi and did well there, transferred to Pittsburgh State, played football there, played on the 1991 National Championship team. That was great, All-American, did all of that. But the only thing that kept me in school was football. I mean, I made grades good enough just to stay eligible to play. And once football was done, I truly lost my identity of who I was because that was a big part of my life. And so I was struggling in school that day. And one of my fraternity brothers gave me a ride to campus, and I was looking for him to give me a ride home, and this car got towed. And she was walking across campus, and she's heard the conversation, and she said, I'll give you a ride. And I was like, who is this? She don't know me.
So the car really did get towed.
The car really did.
It wasn't you just playing. No.
Hey,
my homie's car done got towed.
I'm not that clever. I wish I would. But
wow.
So it did get towed, and she heard the conversation. She said, well, I'll give you a ride. And I was like, well, you don't even know me. She said, you just seem like a nice guy. I'll give you a ride. So I get in the car with her, and as we headed to my apartment, she's beginning to share her story with me, her life story with me. And I'm sitting on the passenger side going, why is she telling me all this stuff? I don't really know her. I probably won't ever see her again. But she just shared everything. We got to my apartment. I said, thank you. I appreciate the ride. If I see you on campus, we'll speak. And that was it. But then later on that day, somebody came outside my apartment blowing the horn. It was one of my fraternity brothers. And he was like, what's your phone number, man? I said, why you want my phone number? So I started telling him my phone number. And he looked in the back seat. And I looked, and it was her in the back seat. She wanted my number. And then from that point on,
Wow.
we just began to talk and get to know each other. And I was still lost. I didn't have a clue what I was going to do with my life, man. I was really at a dead end, man. I didn't know what to do. And she kind of had her idea what she wanted out of life. She was ambitious. She was focused. And so as we continued to talk, she began to see something in me I didn't see in myself. And I kept wondering why she wasting time with me. She probably needed to find somebody else that knew what they want to do. But for some reason, she was willing to invest in me. And I ended up flunking out of school. And I had to go work for a whole year. And she stayed with me and supported me through that journey. And then I got back in school. I finished and graduated. We got engaged. And then right after I graduated, we got married. And so God has a strange way of doing things, man. Just when I needed somebody, he brought the right somebody along. Because I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was trying to figure out who I was and how I was going to make it. Because I had no clue. I didn't tell my parents. I had flunked out. I didn't tell anybody. Just my fraternity brothers knew. And then she came along and began just to pour into me and tell me, you can make it, you can do it. And was just there to support me. She was beginning to encourage me with things I knew but just lost along the way. And so she used to tell me, you know, when you go to class, Michael, sit in the front 3 rows. You need to be in the front 3 rows. Stay out there and talk to your instructor. Let them know you care. I started doing all of that. And man, it made a big difference. And I got down to one class I needed, and I was struggling at one class. And I talked to my instructor, and he was like, I can't help you. He says, it's all I can do. So I came back to the apartment. She said, what's wrong? I said, I'm not going to pass the class. I'm going to have to take it again.
Wow.
She said, can I go talk to him? I said, sure. He ain't going to do anything. I don't know what she said to me. And when she came back, she said, here, write this article out and take it over to him. So I took the article to his office. He shut the door. And he said, I've never done this before in my life. He said, so if you tell anybody, I would deny it. And he said, you're done. You passed. And I graduated.
Talking about an angel.
Ain't nothing but God, man, to make a way for me like that. So that's how we met. And from that, as I said, that's the rest of the story.
Wow, Detrea, now it goes back to you. So you see this man, obviously you're like, I'm assuming, right? He fine, look at him, you know. And
He had hair back then.
He had, his name is Michael Rose, you know, he got the name and everything. It's a smooth name too. You saw something in him. What was that you saw in him? Or not even what was that, like, how was that chemistry that kind of like off the rip was like there? Like when you saw him, was it like the Holy Spirit letting you know? Was it just like you just knew?
You know, I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit. I can't say that because I think first we are attracted by our eyes, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was a nice looking guy, but then he was just a stand-up guy. He was a gentleman, you know, in every way. And he had a real true heart. I knew that right off the bat when I just talking to him, just right there on campus. And so there was just something about him. You know how people just tell you when you know, you know?
Yeah.
And so you just know, right? And so it was just everything clicked. And so I just told him, you know, I was like, we're going to get you back in school, right? And so I worked in admissions, so I knew all the things to do. He was still paying out-of-state tuition. I went to the registrar. I was like, this man's going to marry me. I didn't even know he was going to marry me yet. But I was like, I need the paperwork to make him in-state. And it was Dr. Lee Christensen, I'll never forget. And he was like, okay. And he approved him. All this time he had been paying out-of-state. And then just with one talk, they said in-state tuition. And he was like, are you guys going to stay in Kansas? I was like, yeah, he's going to marry me. Like, he hadn't even asked me yet. But I was like, and like, just like that, stamped it, approved. And so it was just something about Mike. He had a real tender heart, you know, and an open spirit. And just, I don't know, it just clicked. And he was the one. Like, I had dated other guys before, but never a guy like him, right? He was just like a straight and narrow guy.
He's like 101,
yeah.
Limited edition. No, I think my mind goes everywhere. I don't know about yours. I'm just like, wow, like just hearing such a story like that. So Rose, you were trying to find your identity. You were trying to find out who you were. Then God sends you her, and you're like, man, why does she care about me? Why is she?
Right.
How was that mind frame when somebody like that? Like that's a ride or die. What I was hearing when she was talking is behind every great man there's a great woman. That's like what popped in my head while you were you were talking. I'm like, wow, that's a great woman behind a great man, you know, and side by side, you know. What was it like for you as in '93, you know, young college athlete flunking out and having somebody that genuinely cared about you, saw potential in you when you probably didn't even see that potential in yourself? What kind of emotional or mental fortitudes did you have to overcome to accept something like that?
It was difficult because in my mind I was going, she's wasting her time.
Yeah.
She need to find somebody else who's already focused, know what they want. I don't know why she keeps hanging around, but she kept on. She just kept coming around, and we kept hanging out. And it got to the point that one day we're in the car and we're driving, and she looked over at me. I said, "Don't even say it. Don't even say it. I know what you're getting ready to say." And she said, "What? What am I going to say?" I said, "You about to say I'm going to marry you." And she said, "Yeah, you're going to be my husband one day."
Wow.
And I didn't respond back, but I knew when she said it, it was true. I knew right away it was true. It just kind of caught me off guard. It just kind of clicked. You just knew it was supposed to happen. And from that point on, my life just changed totally. It changed totally. And I got back in church because of her.
Wow.
You know, I kind of moved, got out of church, was doing my own thing, and she was connected to the church. She invited me to go to church, and I made every excuse why I couldn't go. I said, I don't have no clothes to wear. I don't want to just go any kind of way. So I thought if I didn't go, she's not going to go. And she just told me, she said, if you go or not, I'm still going to go to church. So then I changed my mind real quick, and I said, well, I'm going too. And so I did. I began to go to church with her. I would sit in the back. She would sit up front because I didn't want to sit too close up to the front. I thought something might happen. So that's why I stayed
Like, I'm
back.
play safe.
Yeah. Stay close to the back door. And it was just something about being in that service continued to draw me back every Sunday. I didn't quite know what it was, but it kept drawing me back. And then eventually, before I knew it, I was in service one Sunday, and the Holy Spirit got really high in the service, and people were crying and shouting. And then I found myself crying, tears running down my face. I was looking around, wondering if anybody was looking at me. I said, who's bothering me? And there was nobody bothering me. It was just the presence of God beginning to move on me. And then before I knew it, the pastor made an altar call, and I found myself standing right in front of him. And he said, what are you doing up here? I said, God's messing with me.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, he is. He has a call in your life. And from that point on, I began to seek what God had for me. I didn't know what that call was, but as time went on, he began to reveal to me that he called me into the ministry. That was something I was kind of trying to stay away from. I didn't see myself going into the ministry, but God had another plan for me. And then eventually I got up under my pastor there in Pittsburgh, Bishop Simpson, and he tutored me along with 4 other elders that were there. And as time went on, I began to grow in my walk with him and try to learn what it was. And so I felt in my heart my calling was to assist pastors. I said, I'm here to assist pastors and help them. I said, that's what I can do. And so I did that for about a long time, probably about 5 years we were there. And then eventually we moved over to Independence. I was working here at the college as a coach. I was driving back and forth through the week. And then eventually, after about a year or so, my wife had to finish up her degree. She was still at Pitt. We made the decision to get off the road because we were driving from here to Pittsburgh every Sunday going to church. And then eventually we made the decision, we prayed about it and said we need to be here in Independence and find a church home here. And so we began to search out a church home here and try to find a place to go. We did find a place to go for about a year or two. Then from there we moved to Coffeyville, started going to church in Coffeyville. Some friends of ours that we went to Pittsburgh State with, they had a church there. And so we went to help them, support them in their ministry for about a year or two, and then they ended up leaving, going to Tulsa. So then we found ourselves right back in the same situation again, looking for a church home. My wife happened to be at Walmart, you know, the old meeting place. Everybody's at Walmart, you know. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Pastor Benny Mosley, and he worked at the college. He was a counselor at the college, and he saw her, and he spoke to her, asked her how she was doing, asked about me, and he said, where you guys go to church at? She said, well, we're looking for a church home. And so he invited us to come and visit their church at Berea, and so we did. We went that Sunday, went to the service, enjoyed it, it was nice. Went back the next Sunday, enjoyed it, and then we continued to go on a regular basis. And then eventually we started to settle in there. I felt like God was calling me to come to help him in the ministry there. So that's what we ended up doing, was being under his leadership for about 5 years. He had some medical issues, and then he had to step away. And I remember one Sunday he called me to his office, and he said, I need to talk to you about something. He said, I'm getting ready to step away from being a pastor. He said, I just can't physically do it anymore. He said, so I need to step away. And in my heart, I was like, I don't want you to leave. I said, I don't want you to leave. I said, I want you to stay. He said, well, it's not your choice. He said, I have to do what's right for God's people. He said, now, I can recommend you, but I can't make you the next pastor here. They have a board. They do the board thing. He said, so it's up to them. But my question to you is, are you interested? And I'll be honest with you, I wanted to say no. Because I wanted to say, no, I don't want that. I'm fine where I'm at. I'm satisfied being the helper of a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. But as I was sitting there before I could answer, God said, realize you're not saying no to him.
Ooh.
You're saying no to me. So I just said, I am interested.
Wow.
He said, well, pray about it, and if they're interested, they'll call you once I'm gone, and they'll have you come in and preach, and then they'll go from there. He said, we'll see what happens. And so he left 2 weeks later and moved to California with his children, his wife and him. And then they went in the search looking for a pastor, so they asked me to fill in as the interim pastor. And so I did for about a month or two. And then the board called me in and said, we've talked and we've made our decision, we want you to be our next pastor. And I said, well, let me pray about it. I said, I don't want to give you an answer. So I talked with my wife about it, and we talked about it and prayed about it. And I said, I gave them the answer. I said, yes. I said, I'll accept. And then that journey began. I just finished my 10th year as the pastor there at Berean.
10 years.
And it's been a blessing, but my life changed when this young lady came into my life. God had a purpose for her.
When you were sharing your story and she was a big part of it, I was thinking about that Bible verse, that Bible story where it talks about women who are married and they come to the gospel and they, continue going to church, living out the word because you will win your husbands over. And I literally read, that's when you were talking about it, I was just like, that's evidence of scripture manifesting in the daily, in the real. Like, how people are like, how come we don't see that? Like, it's happening. You know what I mean? And that's why I love sitting down with people and hearing their story, because you never know the story behind the smile. Like, I would have never known that, Detrea was your ride or die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she was like, nah, we finna get this A from this professor. You finna come to church and you don't even know it, but we married and you're gonna be pastors. So I think to me that's like, it shows like the beauty of like being able and open, like she said, your open spirit, being able and open to change and to better yourself and not be intimidated by, following the rhythm that your wife is setting. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not being afraid of the rhythm that your wife is setting for it. I think it's beautiful. So Detrea, now I'm going to digest what he said, his whole story. What was your story? Did you always serve God? Did you were you a praying woman or praying teenager? Like what was it like? Because clearly you're calling over you. I look at you and like you're always glowing, like you're smiling. Yes. And you're like, I never seen any negative post or anything. You know what I mean? Like you're always like prayer mornings. I read them when you post them on Facebook. I'll be like echoing them too. I'll be like, Father God, thank you for it. And whatever it is we thanking him for, I'm with you thanking him too. But what is that Detrea? Is that like, would you always like that? Did you have a moment where you're like, Jesus, I need you, or was it you just grew up in it?
I mean, I grew up going to church, of course. My mother, always went to church. My dad, not so much. I think a lot of times men and church kind of get sideways sometimes. I think that sometimes it's hard for other men to follow a man, And so my dad never really went, but my mom went all the time. Yeah. And so we always went to church. We always went to Sunday school. We always went to vacation Bible school. So I grew up knowing that God was going to be the author of my faith. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think as you get older, as you get like in high school, you kind of wane away because you want to be popular and you want to do the things that other people do. But then I think as I went to college, I just had like some really bad relationships. You know what I mean? Domestic violence. I had to file a restraining order against a guy who I was dating, and like people knew me because I was also a singer. Like my daughter Cortland is a singer, so I sang and had a vocal scholarship, and so a lot of people in the community knew me, and so whenever I called and I was like, I need to file a restraining order, they're like, what happened to you? Where's he at? You know what I mean? And so I had a lot of protection, and so I literally, before I even knew what was happening, I was breaking generational curses, right? And so I told myself, like, I'm worth more than that. I won't be hit, I won't be choked, I won't be any of those things, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And so standing up for myself, because a lot of women will just be like, I'm so desperate to be loved by you that I'll let you do that to me.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, deuces, I'm out of here. Like, I called the police, I filed a restraining order, don't come back here, period. And so I just kept it moving. And so when I got to Pitt, I told him all about, like, when I met him, I was like, yeah, I dated this guy. I mean, it was like, you know, diarrhea of the mouth. I tell him everything. And so, but I was looking for something different, right? And I think when I met him, I was like, I think he's the one. I think he's the one. And so I've always had a strong connection to God. I mean, he's always been the one that I lean into, right? Because people will disappoint you, Mo. People want the best for you, but sometimes they don't know how to give you their best. But God will never fail you.
Come on.
And so I've always been the person to lean into him and just tell him all about it. You know what I mean? And so, because he'll answer, it may not come right away, but he hears us, and he's going to answer us. And so I've just really got to the point in my life where he's like everything to me, right? And so, like, I don't need to tell people my problems. I just tell God because he can fix them.
Come on.
Like, you can say, I'm praying for you, and I'm sorry that happened to you, but God can fix it. And so I'm trying to teach my kids that too, that, like, you don't have to tell people all your problems, because all they can do is feel sorry for you and, you know, yeah, I'm praying for you, but God can help you. Like, he is the supreme being. He really can move. Like, where people say, like, with that professor, God did that. I didn't do that.
She don't play. She's a woman.
No, I was
faith.
just
Come
I was just the vehicle
Yeah.
that God used to get him his diploma.
Come on.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if we see ourselves as vehicles, that's what I do every day. I try to inspire people to be your very best every single day. Every day. All those students, like, you can do it. You have it in you. You have an inch of doubt, but override that with, I can do this. So yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm like pumped up, dude. I'm like, let's go, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like,
That's good. I know. I feel like you have that, like, gift to see in people, like, beyond what just the situation, like what he said, like, you saw beyond what he was, and you saw that gold. And I feel like every single person has that potential. Like, it takes somebody calling that out and bringing it out of them, like calling them who God has made them to be. And just to see, like, how you had those eyes to see that, it's powerful. Like, and even just as women, like, doing our part, like, you know, if your husband's maybe not going to church yet or not being the man you want to be, like, you show up to church, or you make that change in your house, and, like, the Holy Spirit's going to work on his heart, like, it's going to bring him around, and that's powerful. I love that.
I think the thing that women, Brianna, have to be careful about when they are the one going to church and their husband isn't, to not idolize the pastor. So when you come back home and your husband's like, so how was it? Can't be like, well, Pastor Mo, he preached this. Oh, he's so awesome. But the word of God was preached today, and it penetrated my heart. Because your husband will then become spiteful of you as a pastor. Like, so are you going there for him, or are you going there for the word? So the scripture you're talking about is sanctify your husband with your conversation. So make sure you're not focused. Other women who may be listening to this, if you desire your husband to be in church, just continue to pray for him. And then continue to seek God and continue to love him. Even though he's not going, just say things like, you know what, let me share the scriptures with you today. Not even really mentioning the pastor, because you don't want your husband to feel like he has to compete against the man of God.
That's so good. Yeah. And just like that focus, like, it's God's word, not man's word. And I feel like that's what's beautiful about God's word, is, like, it calls us to respect our husbands and love them. And when we begin to do that at home, like, that's going to make him know God in a different way.
Absolutely.
So I love that point. That was really
and
good.
it removes any, like, wall of, like, like you were saying, like, oh, Pastor so and so said this, and the husband by nature, we're like, hold on,
Yeah.
what is she talking about this man,
Right.
So I like that because now you're saying, man, God spoke to me in church. Hey, this
Yeah.
word of look at this verse, this helps, and it helps create that
Yeah.
connection, that rhythm, that fellowship in the household. I think it's powerful.
That's good. I've never thought of that. That was so good.
And you have to really make sure when you come back from a service, don't say, you should have been there because this was for you.
We were just talking
No,
about
yeah,
that
we were
in one
talking
of our
about
leadership
that.
meetings.
But what you say is say what I just said.
Yeah.
God spoke to me through the word, and here's some things that I want to do to help
Yeah.
elevate us as a couple.
That's good.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
We-
you never want to point the finger back at him and say, I wish, because the
Yeah.
word that is preached is for who's sitting there.
Yeah,
Come
I
on.
always think that every time I think it's for someone else, I'm like, that was probably for me. Like, I think I was the one that needed to
Yes.
hear.
We were just talking about it in one of our leadership meetings because we were talking
Yeah.
about how people sometimes be like, so and so should have been here. And I'm like, are you sure it was for so and so? Because you was there. You know what I mean?
Right, it
And-
might have been for you.
Yeah. That's what it reminds me of. Like, our conversation on that. That's so
Yeah.
good. So 93. That's 30 years. I'm getting better at math.
So
I saw
how long
that.
have you been
Counted
married?
the whole
30
time.
years.
27.
27. Wow.
We've been together 30, so yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
27.
27. So when you look at young couples like us,
Yeah,
right, we're still
what's your
young.
best
the
marriage
white,
advice?
The white hair is just, highlights. So what is? Give me your top marriage advice. Oh, by the way, if you're still watching this, they invited us. I think it was like a year or two ago to a marriage
Yes.
a marriage retreat, the most impactful marriage
It was so
retreat
good.
that I ever been to. And it's not because it was, oh my gosh, it was in a yacht and we went fishing and we went kayaking, but it was just men and women being raw, vulnerable, and just telling young men, older men, just how to love your spouse. It was powerful. That blessed my heart. One thing that I took away from it was from that older gentleman. I don't remember his name, but he was like, every year, he goes, I treat it like it's my first year of marriage every year. And they were married like what, 60 something years or something?
Yeah, 50 something.
50 something years. And he says every year he treats her like if it's the first year of marriage. And to me, that's like powerful. Whenever
Year one.
your significant
Yeah.
other gets on edge, I just be like, we just only been dating for 1 year. It's okay. But what is your number one advice for couples?
Wow.
Put you on the pressure
From your
right there.
experience?
27 years.
This is what I would share with anybody that's in a relationship that's getting ready to move to the next step of getting engaged and getting married is don't go in trying to be perfect.
Wow.
God brings two imperfect people together, but he causes the perfection within us. It's not already in us.
Oof. You got to say that again.
God brings two imperfect people together,
Yeah.
but he causes the perfection because it's not in us, it's in him.
Yeah, that's
And I
good.
think a lot of times what married couples do, people that want to be married, is they watch TV and see these images of what marriage should look like, and they think my marriage should look that way too. And when things begin to get disarray and you're having issues and you're not agreeing and things are not working out, you go, but what happened? We're supposed to have this happy family. But that's all part of being one unit. And it's called being able to be real with yourself. Because a lot of times people look at my wife and I, and we've talked about this, and they look at us and go, the Roses got it together, man. They just got a perfect marriage. And when we get home sometime, we go, if they only knew. If they only knew what we've been through, they would understand our story.
Yeah.
Now, the key to that is we've been through a lot, but what we've decided is through it all, we ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, that's good.
We just made the decision that we're going to stay together no matter what because God brought us together. But there is no perfect marriage.
No.
Come
Quit
on.
striving for that. That's
Yeah,
no such
no.
thing. You setting yourself up for failure when you
Exactly.
say, we're going to have a perfect marriage. We're going to have the perfect kids. Hold up, there is no perfect kids.
Come on.
Care how many books you read, they can give you some advice, but your kid is not the book in the book.
Oof.
Your kid
That's
is not
so
the one in
good.
the book.
Yeah.
Okay?
Kid is not the kid in the book.
So you've got to take time out and seek God and figure it out for yourself because our marriage is not your marriage.
Yeah.
And our issues are not your issues.
Yeah.
They may be similar, but because we are different, they're not the same.
Yeah.
And so it's always behooves us as married couples is to leave the lines of communication open. I think for me that's one thing I had to learn when I got married because I'm a very quiet person. I'm an introvert, so I don't talk a lot. and she's an extrovert.
She's
Talks a lot.
like, I'm gonna get you that A.
Yeah. And that's good. And it's good that she does that, because there are times when things are difficult in our relationship that I don't want to talk. And she'll come in and sit down and want to talk it out. And so it puts me in a situation where I have to open up and talk with her, because the thing we don't like to do is we don't want that to become a hindrance to us. I don't want to go to bed with this thing hanging over us. So we try to work that thing out that day at some point. Now, we may have to go, I may go in the front room for a minute, she go in the bedroom for a minute, but then at some point we're going to come together.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, I'll say, I'm sorry, I messed up. Forgive me. If she's wrong, she'll say, I'm sorry, I messed up. But it took some growth to get to that.
Wow.
It didn't happen in our first year of marriage. It took some time for us to get to that point where we were able to be vulnerable with each other and trust that each other wouldn't take advantage of each other when we're in a vulnerable situation.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in a marriage, when you have issues, somebody will strike back at you. And so the one thing we said to each other when we got married is this: if we mess up, and when we mess up, and we deal with that issue, it's gone.
We don't bring it back up.
So we can't wait till the next issue come along and I come back and reach back and grab and go,
Yeah.
remember
That's so
when you
good.
did?
That's good. Yeah.
So we made that vow on each other, and we've never done that. Once we settle it, it's over, and we move on and
That's
continue
good.
See,
on.
forgetfulness.
Yeah.
Because I think that
good.
hurts a lot of marriages, because when you're carrying that around and you're waiting for a moment to strike,
Yeah.
it can only hurt. It's not going to help.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to have those open line of communication and be on the same path that you want to be on with your mate if you're holding on to stuff that happened 2-3
That's
months
such a good
ago.
analogy.
Yeah.
And so we try to tell couples when they come to us and talk to us about marriage and how to deal with those situations is, I said, whenever you have an issue, talk about it, deal with it, and leave it there.
That's good. Yeah.
So don't wait till the next issue come along, so I got some for him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna
Have a
bring
whole
that back.
pile.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And so I think that would be the advice I would give to any young
That's
couple
really
or
good.
married couple today. No, the Bible says to strive for perfection in everything we do,
Yeah.
but we are not perfection.
Yeah.
Right.
We're created in His image, and everything He made is good.
Yeah.
But there's no good thing in this flesh.
Yeah.
And so we're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And when you make the mistakes, don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up. It's a part of the growth process of marriage. You're going to develop through that marriage at different stages in that marriage. And then you're going to mature into the person God wants you to be. And she's going to also, if you just don't quit in the process.
Yeah.
Because it's a process. It's like making a cake. You don't just come home and then the cake's made. You got to get the ingredients, and then you put them together, and you slowly mix them together. And then eventually you pour them into a pan. Then you put them in the oven, and then guess what you got to do?
Wait.
You got to wait until it's ready.
So good.
That's what marriage is. You got to wait until your marriage has got to the point where you're ready to handle what's getting ready to come next.
And why do you think that people want that perfect marriage? Like, why do you think people strive for that? Because one of the things that took me away when you said is, don't go into that marriage trying to be perfect. Because we live in a social media world where,
Yeah.
That's the
oh,
problem.
so and so's married. Oh my God, they're smiling. Oh my God, they're in Paris. Oh, they're in, like, they're living. Oh my God, look at that. And when you said that, I like what came to my mind was like those couples that butt heads, but to the world they got it all together. That they're trying to strive for perfect. Where did that come from? Like, why do you think people do that? You think it's from social media? You think it's just
I
like,
think it's an
I do.
image deal.
I think it is, and I think, I'll tell you, Mo, one of the biggest eye-openers for us are friends of ours that have been married as long as us, but they have separate bedrooms,
Wow.
right? They still live in a house, but they don't love each other. It's
yeah.
just a financial thing. It's just an agreement at this point.
wow.
And even when we, you talked about the marriage retreat, we were praying about what couples to invite.
Yeah.
And I reached out to one of my girlfriends because, again, on social media, it looks real good, right? And it really broke my heart because she said, oh, Detrea, we don't love each other. We just live here together because it makes financial sense. And we really talked about that, and I was heartbroken for her because I thought to myself, man, when I come home from work, I'm so excited.
Yes.
I probably have 10 stories. You probably do too.
That's how Bree is.
Right?
Hey,
Like, let me tell you about what happened today. in this-
could we hang
Right.
out? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I gotta cut this grass. Listen, the grass needs me.
But could you imagine coming home and just being like, hey Mo, and then you go to your room and he goes to his, and like, how do you eat meals? Like, what do you
Ooh,
talk
that's so
about?
good.
How do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it just baffles me. But there are more people like that than we even know. And I was just like, wow. And I told her, I said, sis, I'm really praying for you. She said, well, it's just what it is. We're used to it. But that's sad. And so I do think we look at social media and we see those things, but I always call it fake book. Because, right?
That's good.
When you post what you want people to know about
fake
you.
book. That's good.
It's fake book because nobody wakes up and goes, well, I'm feeling kind of sad today.
Exactly.
I don't really want to go to work, but I know I got to get this check. Y'all pray for me. We might be thinking that in our head as we're getting up. But we gotta. But some of that is we gotta press through that too, right? That's the mental part of we gotta press toward the mark.
Come on. Yes,
and so nobody wants to read Facebook and be like, oh, poor Mo, poor Mike, poor Bree, poor Detrea. They go there because they're looking for inspiration or they're looking for a fight. Right?
Yeah.
One or two things.
One of the
right?
two, validation or a problem.
And so I always just think that if you really want to know a person, you got to get to know them. You got to get to know who they are, right? Because what is the scripture about the fruit?
You know them by the fruit.
Yeah, you'll know them by the fruit they bear. So if they faking the funk, you're gonna get to know. You gonna because whatever you do in the dark, it will come to light.
That's so good. That's what's so. That's such. I'm just speaking like out loud. Like that's just.
I think people become comfortable with too, kind of like this is my life and this is his life. Like you just get in that comfort. Like how did you guys protect that? Like I see you guys take walks together, and like how do you protect so that your marriage doesn't get to that point of you do you, I'm gonna do me.
Trying to get me to walk?
Like, no, but see my thing. I do always beg him to take walks, and he's not like taking walks. But you're good at spending other time with me.
You can just go around the block, man.
She be having me play pickleball. She'll tell you I'll be playing pickleball, and then she beat me. I'm competitive, and then I'm heated. Then I'm gonna go knock on y'all door talking about. Hey, I need a session.
And everybody thinks Mo loves pickleball, but because of Instagram, but he doesn't. He just goes.
I go because of her, and then she beat me. I don't know how. She never plays sports.
I don't. I'm the most.
And me, I'm like I'm gonna beat her today. And then she ends up beating me. I don't even know how she beats me. But she beats me, and then she goes, "Okay, let's
That's
watch
why.
the
That's why pickleball's for all of us that didn't play sports.
It is a fun game.
She be
forgot what I
whooping
was
me
gonna
too.
say. But yeah, how do you protect that?
protect
Because
that?
I feel like it's important to ask that question before you get to that point. Like I feel like people go to counseling or mentors after they're at that point. But like why not ask that before so that you protect before you're at 20 years and not talking to each other? Like what was that? How did y'all keep that?
So I think when we went into our marriage, we sat down. We went through marriage counseling. I think that's a key. Premarital counseling with our pastor in Pittsburgh, and he kind of threw some questions that have made us think about all the different decisions about why are you getting married? What about children? What about finances? And all those kind of things to think out. And so what I think has helped us is we sat down and talked about we don't ever want to lose us.
That's so key.
We don't ever want to lose us. We don't ever want to lose what brought us together. Yeah, we want to expand our family. We want to have kids. And that's great. But we don't want to pour everything in them and have nothing to give to each other.
Come on, that's so good.
You know, it's kind of like having a pitcher, and all you're doing is pouring into somebody else. And then you come home to your spouse, you got nothing to give them, they have nothing to give you. And then that's what happens to a lot of marriages is when their kids get old enough to leave home, they don't know each other. We've had married couples that came to us and told us, you know, our kids are gone. And I said, are you excited? It's just you and your wife now? It's like, no. We don't really know each other. We're like strangers. Man, that baffles me because I'm wondering, I know what's happened. We put so much energy into our kids, we lost us. We lost that commitment we made to each other when we stood up there in front of God, in front of everybody else. We lost that when the kids left. And now we got to either rediscover it or just call it quits. And we live in a world now where it's so easy to say, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. But the most difficult thing to do is to say, I'm staying. And so we made that commitment to each other that we don't ever want to lose what we have. So we, on purpose, have a date night every month
Oh, that's
So we
good.
take a day off from work,
Mhm.
and we'll take the kids to school,
We don't tell them.
and we don't tell them.
When they were little, we didn't tell them.
We
Now
don't
we
tell
separate.
them. And then we either go to Joplin, go
Oh.
to Tulsa, go to Kansas City, go to Wichita, and we hang out for the day and just
So
hang
good.
out, shop, eat, talk,
Yeah.
and just have fun with just each other, so we don't lose that connection.
That's good. Yeah.
And that way we can refuel each other, and then we go back home and we pour back into our kids, but we pour it into each other.
Yeah.
But you got to make it a purpose and a point in your
Yeah.
marriage to never lose who you are. And we've seen a lot of marriages be destroyed because they lost focus of them and turned everything into the kids.
Mhm.
And when the kids left, the marriage left.
Yeah.
That's deep.
That's so good. I feel like we were talking about that because we
Yeah.
just like love Prince so much. We're like obsessed with him. We're like, we just want to be with him all the time. And we were noticing like, no, we actually have to like spend time together for us to be good. Like it's so
Yeah.
hard because you adore your kids, like they're
Yes.
God's treasure. But
Yes.
like in order for them to be good, like y'all have to be good
Right.
too.
And
And
it reminds me of, I think you said it, or when we took marriage counseling, premarital counseling, about remember that you guys are the first ministry. Like, you know, sometimes
Yes.
sometimes when you have kids, it becomes like your kids become your first ministry,
That's
but
it.
your first ministry is your
It's
spouse.
yeah.
Right here.
And then it pours into, and it reminded me of
Yeah.
that. But I think when we were in premarital counseling, either you mentioned it or somebody mentioned it. It always
Yeah.
stood out to me. So when you said that, I was like, that's so true, because it could
Yeah.
get so busy.
But you're
Yeah. It's either like busy with work or busy with church or just doctor's
Life,
appointments,
yeah.
and then you're just like,
Yeah. When
What's
do I
up?
have time for
Yeah.
my wife?
And I think scheduling it is key too, because like you hear that when you first get married, you're like, why would we need to schedule date night? We do date nights all the time, and then a couple years in, you're like, oh, you actually have to schedule
Yeah.
it, like, or it won't happen.
Right,
Like
it won't
it's
happen.
crazy.
if your wife tells you to go play
Being
pickleball,
intentional.
it's your date night. But just,
I'll let you choose something you want to do next.
Yeah, you do. You
that-
have to make it intentional.
That's
Yeah.
what we did. We did like a date night the other day,
Yeah.
and
That's
we
really
realized
good.
how important it is to schedule your date
Yeah,
nights.
this life gets busy.
Yeah, and then we play pickleball, and then we got
Yeah. And you just want to hear each other too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, especially with your careers,
Yeah.
like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Even though those are interview questions, you should be asking your
Yeah.
spouse
They're
that.
good,
Because
yeah.
the thing is, people say this, we grew apart. Well, what does that mean? No, because if you're asking, Mike, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you want to do? What's the next step for you? How can I help make that get there for you? You know what I mean? So you are still pouring into your spouse the same way that when you were in love with them, Google eyes at the
Yes.
beginning, you still have to nurture that all the way. And so, like for Mike, he took a huge leap of faith. He worked at a job for over 20 years. And then this past year, he said, I'm ready. I want to do something else. And we prayed about it.
Wow.
And, he put out several resumes. And every time God shut the door, that wasn't for him. And then finally on this last position that he got, he's like, this is it. This is where God was wanting me all the time. And so, as a married couple, everything has to be on the table. And he's like, I got to take a pay cut. And I was like, okay, God will provide.
That's good.
He said, I've never seen the righteous forsaken,
Come on,
nor his seed
yeah.
begging bread. So he will make it up in another way. You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
yeah.
And so, because I think what people worry about is, I got to have the money, but let's not negate mental health, right? If every day you wake up and you hate what you're doing, which is what happened to him, then he's horrible at home. I'm just saying it.
Yeah.
He's sad, he's depressed, he's moping around, he's not jovial, he's not happy. So if taking this job makes you happy, then we'll suck it up. You know what I mean? And so as a spouse, a lot of spouses are like harping on their husband, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. No, he needs to be happy too.
Yeah,
Come
being
on.
there for each other. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's
yeah.
super, super important.
I love what you said about the righteous not being forsaken. So one of the things that I was thinking about was couples who don't have that vulnerability in their marriage to do that,
Yeah.
to throw it on and be like, hey man, like,
Yeah, some people are scared. So men have to, the Bible talks about the man submitting to God. And in doing that, I think you open up your heart, right? Early on in me and Mike's marriage, when he didn't have a job, he didn't tell this story, but it's a great story because, again, I saw something in him. The job that he had for over 20 years, I did his resume and cover letter, and I mailed it in without him knowing it. And then after I mailed it in, I said, oh, by the way, I mailed that in for you because you can do that job. I said, you've been a coach. That job is nothing but coaching people now instead of coaching kids. And, you know, the rest is history. But first he had to be vulnerable to say, when I saw the chains break off of Mike, is one day we were driving home from Pittsburgh and he looked over at me in the car and said, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Come on.
And I think God wanted him to admit that.
Vulnerable
right?
place.
And when he did that, like within the next week, he got that job.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
God did that. So I think sometimes we have to show our nakedness to God too and say, I can't do this without you.
Yeah.
I need you to come in here and intervene on my behalf.
That's good.
She has so much of you.
I
Like you
know.
and her got so much in
I know.
common.
I love her.
I'm like, I'm hearing you talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, got the redheaded edition. It's the limited edition.
Yeah.
Dude, it's super cool. Like hearing you speak is like
That's
so
good.
uplifting and like motivating, because I can relate a lot to your story. You know, former college athlete. You know, first one in my family graduated out of college, and when I met Bree, it was the same way. I was just like, what do you know what to do? I'm like, lift heavy stuff and play sports. She's like, there's more to you than that. And I'm like, nah, fam. Like you ain't read the menu. Like it literally says 6'1", 300-pound Puerto Rican, lift stuff. And I remember when we were engaged or dating, and I was like, all right, I could see myself being a cop. And she was like, a cop? And she's like, you're a communicator. You're good with words. She's like, what if you go to Bible college?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't. I used to be an athlete.
Not
you know?
that
like,
a cop is a bad job.
I did the school thing. You know, I'm in Kansas because of the school thing. You know.
Yeah.
And she was like, just think about it. Like I'm like, well, she was like, why do you want to be a cop? And I'm like, cause it's adrenaline. You know, I could use my physicality. Like I don't know. There's something that popped in my head, and she's like, what about if you go to college? We were like, I think we were engaged. Or we're about to get engaged.
We were engaged.
We were
yeah.
engaged.
We were getting married.
And she's like, what if you go to Bible college? Get your, go to Bible college, get a fresh start, get your mind renewed, just. And she goes, I'll work. At that time, you were interning, right?
I was starting.
You were starting.
full-time,
She was starting
I
at
think,
full time. And in my head, I always felt like the simp. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm the man. I could just go become a cop and just provide the bread for the family, and then everything will be in how it's supposed to be. She's like, no, you're going to go to college. I'm like, I don't want to go to college, man. Do they have a football team? And they're like, no, they don't. And I was like, okay. And, but it just reminded me of that parallel with you guys. And I was just like, wow. And I think if any men that are listening to this and you haven't yet gotten yourself in that vulnerable place where your wife sees potential in you and she's been calling it out for years and years, you never know what's on the other side of your vulnerability. Like, you don't know what's in the other side of you going, you know what? Maybe she's right and I'm wrong, right? And you never know. 20 years in a career, how many of y'all watching this right now could say you worked in a place for 20 years? No, I'm just saying. Listen, it wasn't coming at you. I'm just saying, 20 years because of the willingness, the vulnerability, and to trust on your spouse to be like, I see something in you.
Yeah.
I see potential in you, and the man being like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. I think there's so much power in that, and I think that's just why you guys are so highlighted to us whenever we see you guys, is because you could tell you guys are you guys are one. You know what I mean? It's just when you see one rose, you see both of them. It's not like there's a distinction.
Roses,
And I think that's so beautiful, and just hearing that vulnerability and that openness to be like, I wrote his cover letter because I know my man's potential, and then he got the job. 20 years, but imagine if y'all would have never came to pass. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that I think about when I hear stories like that. I'm like, wow, how many wives are believing for their husbands, right? And the husband praying with them, but the husband is just kind of scared, and that's why I'm addressing it to the husband more, because I think a lot of us, majority of us, struggle with that pride, that you settle for the least because you think that's what you're good at. But what happens when you become vulnerable and accept the challenge? You know what I mean? And that's what it reminded me of when I was in that phase in my life where I was like, all I know how to do is play sports, and I don't know what else. And Bree was like, nah, you can go to college, you good, trust me. And then I was like, nah, fam, I'm not. And wow, such a powerful thing. You have a question? Oh, no?
No.
Oh. But yeah, so okay, 30 years together, 27 years of marriage. Power couple, I'm gonna say it like that. Just powerful. Do you teach at the college? What is it that you do now?
So I'm an administrator now. I recently was promoted. I'm associate vice president for inclusion and belonging at Pittsburgh State.
That's awesome.
What?
So yeah, I'm pretty excited.
So how was now I gotta ask this because you did what I did.
Mm-hmm.
No, we married up.
We did.
You know what I mean? She just
I
said
married up
she
too.
said like 4 different titles. You know, then you're like I work with people in sports. You know, and what was it for you as a husband having a powerful woman by your side? Like for me, like when I look at Bree, I get excited to talk like people what Bree does. I didn't even know what she did. I came one day from home because somebody was trying to like downplay me, like, "Oh, you did smart thing, huh?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, I ain't doing a smart thing."
Right,
and I'm
right,
like,
right.
but to me, I love bragging on my wife. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like a flaw brag, but it's like I gotta like she's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you, like in your marriage, or how is it like now, like knowing that your wife is a boss, like you know? She's a G.
I'm excited for her, you know, and I'm always pushing her to go higher if that's what she wants.
Come on.
You know, I'm not intimidated by what my wife
Yes.
has become, what God has advanced to be, because when she goes up, I go up too.
Hey, yeah.
You know, so I'm proud of her for the accomplishments that she has made on her professional job, and to be in the role she is right now at Pittsburgh State University is nothing but God. Man. It's nothing but God, because her desire in college was to be a teacher.
Oh wow,
She
thank you.
wanted to be a teacher, and she kept taking the test she had to take to get your license. And she'll miss it by 1 point, 2 points, and she took that test probably 10 times, and just couldn't do it, couldn't get there. So she ended up changing her major and finished up and went into admissions, and from there she just continued. Then she ended up at ICC when I was out there. She worked in admissions there. I was coaching there. Then she went to Labette for a little while, and then God maneuvered her back to ICC for a little bit, and then an opportunity came up at Pittsburgh State because that's where her heart was. She wanted to work back at Audemars, and there was an opportunity there, so she went in, was over the diversity programs, and then from there, God began just to open doors for her.
Wow.
And He's gotten her to this point where she's now an administrator. And so I'm not intimidated by her, what she does. I'm excited for her, for what she does. And I know some men would feel
Yeah, that's what the
intimidated by
question was
that
leading up to. Yeah.
because they may say somebody look at them differently because, hey, your wife is this and you're this.
Because I just saw the reason why I asked that question is because me and you are in the same boat where like our wives obviously do a different profession and are the earners, or you could say, in the marriage. But I saw this toxic interview. It was super toxic, and it said this. It said women who are higher earners than the spouse, than the husband, usually look down on their husband. Which I'm like, I don't know where you got the statistic from, right? So what I want us to talk to is those husbands that maybe their wife had an opportunity to be the earner, to be the not just even the earner, but to be elevated because God saw it to be that way, and they told their spouse no because they were afraid because of their pride to nah, fam, like you can't do that in our household. What would you encourage somebody who's watching this right now who's battling with that? Like, hey, my wife had a great opportunity, but I told her no because I'm the male figure and I'm the one that needs to be. How would you encourage them that are going through that?
I guess I would have that gentleman, that man, ask himself, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Because do you know who you are?
That's so good. Come on.
Has your wife reaffirmed to let you know that you're still the man?
Right.
No matter what happens in her professional level of work, whatever she gets, I get also.
Yeah.
And the thing we have to be careful about as men is we allow others to tell us what we should be and what we should not be. They're not even married. And you got to be careful about that because you don't allow somebody to get in your marriage that has no clue what marriage is really about.
Sure.
And so as a man, you have to be willing to be vulnerable and be willing to allow God to lead you. Because if He's elevating her, guess what? He might get ready to elevate you too.
Yeah.
Come on, that's so good.
There's
And
no
that's the thing we got to be
There's no limit.
be careful about. It's not limiting our wives, our spouses, and saying that's not going to look good. If you're doing that and I'm doing this, my buddy's going to talk about me. Well, it had nothing to do with your buddies.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't marry your buddies. You married this.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to be as a man. Be confident in who you are.
Yeah.
And be confident who God gave you as your spouse. And support them in every way you possibly can. Because, man, it can only do what? The blessings roll off of her and right on you.
Exactly.
Come on,
yeah.
that's so good.
So when you limit her, you limit yourself.
Yeah.
And you miss out on what God has for you and for your marriage. And I know that's hard for men because we're taught as young men, as young boys, to be this tough guy. You don't cry, you don't show emotion. You're supposed to lead the family. But in order to be the head of the house, you have to learn when to say yes and when to say no.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you taking a step back and allowing your wife to shine. That doesn't take anything away from you. God still called you to be the head of your house.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it speaks volumes of the quality of man when you are able to step back.
That's
you know,
it.
like to step back and be like, nah, like that's my
That's
wife.
it.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
Like
it.
that's me. That's me. So I love that. Now, Detrea, to you, what advice would you give a woman, a married wife who is getting elevated at her job, but she's hit with the struggle with, I don't want my man to look like less than, or she's struggling with that
In her head.
in her head, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's like, God is like, hey, this is for you, but she's struggling. What would you tell a wife in her household?
First, I tell her to get out of her head, right? Because the blessings of the Lord maketh rich, and it addeth no sorrow. And if you two are a team, so one thing we always tell our kids is this: it doesn't matter who makes the most money in this house because it goes in one pot.
Exactly.
It pays all the bills, and if you want something, you still need to ask your daddy for it.
I
Right?
love that.
So we don't ever let our kids pit us against each other. Like, you know, early on the kids would be like, well, you make the most so you can. No, it doesn't work like that. He is the head of this house.
That's good,
And if
yeah.
you need something, a new pair of shoes, or you want a new dress, it still needs to go through your father. And so, like, just the other day, I can't remember, we bought Lorraine something, and she said, thank you to me. I said, thank your dad, too. Oh, well, we went to Wichita, and they got their hair done.
Oh.
And they said, thank you. And I said, no, thank your dad, too. It's his money, too. And so I think the woman has to make sure she understands that he is the head of this house.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if I'm bringing in $10,000 and he's bringing in $1.
Yeah.
It's still his money,
Yeah.
too.
Come on.
And so for women, you know, my mom never worked. She was a domestic engineer. That means a housewife,
Yeah.
right?
Domestic engineer.
Domestic
I,
engineer.
when you said that,
I like
see,
that
I
name
play
for
sports. You
stay-at-home
know what I'm saying? Domestic engineer. I'm like, engineers. She
Yeah.
made some.
Yeah.
See, I grew up with a boss mom. I'm like, my bad.
No, so she was a housewife.
Wow.
And she never worked outside of the home. And my dad used money to control her. And so she always told us girls, make your own money. If you want to buy a nice purse, you can afford to buy a nice purse. If you want to buy a pair of shoes, you can buy a pair of shoes. You don't have to ask him for it. So you have to realize when you think about generational curses, my mother was hurt by a man
Yeah.
who used money to control her and to make her pretty much beg him for anything she wanted. And so she translates that hurt into her kids.
Right.
But again, every marriage is not your parents' marriage.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
good.
knowing that, like, I know Mike would never do that, right? And so, but we've always just been a team with finances, and like, if I'm like, oh, I really want a new Coach purse, he'll be like, well, then go buy it then. If he wants golf clubs, we'll go get them then, you know what I mean? But we've never been like, well, you need to do this to get those golf
Yeah,
clubs, or you need to do
that's
this.
Wow,
And
that's good.
so I think sometimes women especially, they've seen their parents, they've seen their mother, and different people have different ideals about how money should be spent and used. And so it comes over into your marriage. But if you keep God first, and you know that he is at the top, and your husband,
So good.
we honor our husbands
Yeah.
as they honor God.
Yeah. That's good.
And so when you do that, it's no big I's and little U's. It's all one.
Yeah.
And so we're really trying to teach our girls that too, that you can be excellent. You can
Yeah.
go, you know, Cortland's going to graduate with her master's. She's going to be a therapist.
Wow.
She's going to be great. But even if her husband drives the trash truck, he's still her husband.
Yes,
And you
that's
still
good.
respect him.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of women we got to get back to the basics, you
Yes,
guys.
we do.
We've lost it somewhere where, again, social media is trying to teach our kids, and the church needs to teach our kids.
Yeah.
Come on.
We need to teach our kids. We can't rely on the internet to do that for us. And so having those conversations, with the kids about how you treat a person, how you are supposed to be treated, is super, super important. So
Yeah.
my advice to women is he's still your man, he's still your
Yes,
husband,
yeah.
no matter what you make or what he brings in.
Yeah.
The love doesn't change, because he's right. It trickles down.
Yeah.
When I'm blessed,
So
you're
good.
blessed.
Uh-huh.
When he's blessed, I'm blessed.
Yeah.
And the blessings aren't just financial, it's everything. It's your
Exactly.
health,
Hell
it's your
yeah.
well-being, it's your mental capacity. All of those things are
Yeah.
important.
Here we like to say health, wealth, and wisdom. That's it.
Yeah.
I like that perspective. Like everything we do it together. Like let's go out and make income for our family. Like at the end of the day, we're all bringing it in, and it's for our family.
Right.
Like it all goes in the same pot,
Right.
like you said. And like everything we do, parenting our kids, like it's all done together. That's a good
Yeah.
perspective.
Don't ever let
All
your
that-
kids pit you against one another.
It all goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No,
all done together.
I got a pair of gloves for Prince.
You got some already?
I get up
Oh,
in the
this has
attic.
been so good.
Once
Yeah.
you turn 16, I'm gonna put these on. For what? Just put them on. No, it's such a good sit down.
I know. I feel like we could talk forever. We have to do another one, another part 2.
There'll definitely be a part 2 because we're gonna keep going for like another hour, and then
It
people are
was
gonna be
so
like,
good.
"This is the 3-day episode."
We're still listening.
But I want to thank you guys
Yeah.
watching for clicking and liking and sharing To The Brim podcast. I want to thank the Roses for coming,
Thank you.
Yes,
Michael
thank you
and
guys.
Detra, and thank you, Bree, for joining me on this one.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for
I love when you do
letting
them
me.
with me.
No, I'm kidding.
I get to think different when you're saying
Aw,
it because
thanks.
you share different things. So
You're sweet.
thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on Spotify. Follow us on Facebook. Not on Facebook, on
YouTube.
YouTube. Stay blessed. Stay encouraged. See you guys next time.
Bye.